In this video, we're going to talk about the top 7 manipulative tactics people are using on you. Many of us have a natural intuition that lets us know when something's off about someone, but there are manipulative behaviors that can make us drop our guard when we shouldn't. And make sure you stick around for the end of the video where I'll warn you about the one manipulative clue that should always warn you that trouble is coming. The first manipulative behavior is niceness. You might be thinking, what's wrong with being nice? Well, on the surface, nothing. In fact, that's going to be true for many of the most manipulative behaviors on this list. They're not automatically bad. It's how they're used and the motivation behind them that matters. The thing about niceness is that it isn't a personality trait, it's a tool. If you really want to see this in action, see how a 4-year-old daughter talks to her father when she wants something. She's so nice and sweet and is the perfect daddy's girl. And if her father rejects her idea, she drops that nice act in a heartbeat. You'll also see this with men when they're trying to get a woman to like them. They come across as sweet and charming until the moment they feel rejected, and then they turn on the woman. So be wary of people that are excessively nice and don't assume it's a core feature of their personality. Pay close attention to what they want from you and be very clear in your refusal if they want something that you don't want to give. Do not allow their niceness to make you feel guilty for rejecting them. The second manipulative tactic is typecasting. Typecasting is when you give a mild insult to the other person as a way of manipulating their behavior. For example, I might say, "You don't look like the kind of person that would help someone in need," if my goal were to manipulate you into helping me carry a heavy item from my car to my apartment. The goal is to make you want to prove that the negative stereotype isn't true. The problem is that it's incredibly manipulative. Even if I did genuinely need your help, I didn't ask for it, but instead manipulated you into feeling obligated to help me. It's a dirty tactic. The way you counter this tactic is by completely ignoring it. The goal of the manipulative person is to get you to prove the statement wrong. So the way you counter it is by acting as though you never even heard the words. The third manipulative tactic is forced teaming. Forced teaming is when the person uses words like our and we to imply that the two of you are on the same team. It's commonly used in literary works to make the reader feel like they're part of the story. As with niceness, using teaming language isn't always bad. I regularly use language like this to show my friends that I'm with them and to show the community of people that I coach that we're all in this together. The difference is they want to be on my team because it's valuable to them to have me on their side. But as with niceness, you want to keep your eye out for why the person is using teaming language. If you just met someone and they seem to be overly friendly and they're using teaming language, then they're probably trying to get you to drop your guard. Maybe they're trying to walk you back to your place or to get you to buy something. Once you start to pay attention to this, you'll see teaming language all over the place. You'll hear things like, "We all know life is difficult." Well, maybe I don't know life is difficult. Maybe I don't agree with that at all. But by using teaming language, it becomes so much easier to convince people to go along with what the person is saying. It is an extremely common manipulative tactic, so you'll definitely want to keep an eye out for it. While we're talking about manipulation, let's dive into what manipulation really is. Manipulation has a very negative connotation, but really, to manipulate someone is just to control or influence them. Oftentimes it's used for bad reasons, but it can be used for good. For example, a few years ago, I was at this party with a friend. When the party ended, she was insistent on driving home. She was certain that she would be fine and she didn't want to leave her car at the party. Now, I could have forcibly taken the keys from her, but that wouldn't have worked out well. She was being very belligerent and probably would have caused a scene. So what could I do? Well, I could convince her that driving home wasn't in her best interest. So that's what I did. I mentioned what would happen if she got pulled over or got into an accident. I talked about how easily we could come get her car in the morning and how she was probably too tired to drive home anyway. What I did was manipulate her, but for a very good reason. I wanted her and everyone else on the road to be safe, and I didn't want her to get in trouble. So recognize that just because you're manipulating someone or they're manipulating you, it isn't necessarily a bad thing. What's important is that you know why they're trying to manipulate you, so that you can decide if the two of you have a common goal or if they're trying to get you to do something against your will. If you're finding this video helpful, give it a like and consider sharing it with a friend. The fourth manipulative tactic is the unsolicited favor. We've all seen this one in action before on television. The guy walks up to a girl as she's walking down the street back to her place and offers to help her carry her grocery bags. Or the guy sees the girl walking to class and offers to carry her books. Those actions, in and of themselves, are fine. The problem is what comes next. After she says no, or before she can say anything at all, he reaches over and grabs her bags or books from her. This is problematic for a couple of reasons. For starters, he's now in possession of her property, which makes it harder for her to get away from him. But it's worse than that. The real problem is that this manipulative act takes advantage of the principle of reciprocity. The principle of reciprocity is what makes us feel obligated to give back to the people that give things to us. Simply put, if I do someone a favor, most people will feel obligated to do me a favor in return. This is the reason why so many people reject help when it's offered, because they don't want to feel that sense of obligation toward the other person. The problem with the unsolicited favor is that it forces that feeling of obligation on someone without even allowing them to decide if they wanted it. It usually starts out small. All they want in return is a few moments of your time to talk. But you can counter this manipulative tactic by remembering you don't owe them anything. You didn't ask for their help, and so the principle of reciprocity can be safely ignored. And in cases where they took something from you as part of the unsolicited favor, just politely ask for it back. Something like, "I'd appreciate it if you'd give me my groceries," or "Can I please have my books back?" will both work well. The fifth manipulative tactic is the use of unnecessary detail. You may have seen this one on the TV show NCIS. It's the seventh of Agent Gibbs's rules. Always be specific when you lie. The concept here is simple. The more details in a story, the more believable it tends to sound. But as with all manipulative tactics, we need to look at the reasoning behind the technique. Giving a very specific and detailed lie doesn't simply serve to make the other person believe it. It also serves to make the speaker believe it. For example, let's say you ask your partner where he or she has been, and they respond, "I was out with Sam." That's a perfectly reasonable answer. If that's the truth, that may well be all you need to know. If you do need to know more, you can always ask for more details. But what if your partner is lying? What if they weren't out with Sam? Well, it's entirely possible they'll think you won't be convinced by that answer. The reason is because they're not convinced. It isn't the truth, so it doesn't convince them. So they start adding a bunch of unnecessary details to try and make the story more convincing to them. It isn't you they're trying to convince themselves. This is why you want to be wary when people start barfing out a bunch of completely unnecessary information. Much of the time, it'll be a sign that something's wrong. As with all of these techniques, you need to look at the context. A person that's hemorrhaging a bunch of unnecessary details isn't necessarily lying to you. They may just be uncomfortable. Perhaps you're on a first date and they're nervous. Perhaps the two of you just met and they're intimidated to talk to you because they find you attractive. Something is off, but it doesn't have to be bad. But when you're talking to someone that should be totally comfortable talking to you and they're nervously giving unnecessary details, that is definitely a warning sign. The sixth manipulative tactic is ignoring when you say no. I talk about this more in the next video on how to deal with stalkers and how to hopefully prevent the people you date from ever becoming stalkers to begin with. But for now, I want you to realize that no is a complete sentence. You are allowed at any time to tell a person no, and they should respect that. There are a lot of ways a person can react to hearing no. They can graciously accept it and move away politely. They can feel rejected and walk away sad. They can feel rejected and become angry, perhaps even saying something rude to you as they leave. All of these show that they are at least listening to you and respecting your position. But if you say no, and they respond by pretending you didn't say it, they are clearly, without question, attempting to manipulate you into changing your answer, and it's a red flag. At the very least, you know you're dealing with someone that doesn't respect you enough to listen to you when you express your wishes. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned the one manipulative clue that should always warn you that trouble is coming. Having someone ignore you when you say no is certainly a big one, but it's also relatively obvious. Our seventh manipulative tactic is the unrequested promise. This one is absolutely huge. It should always set off alarm bells in your head and is a glaring red flag. What you have to realize is that promises don't mean anything unless you're dealing with someone that always keeps their word. For most people, there is no downside to breaking a promise, and this is especially true if they only recently met you. The entire purpose of a promise, the only reason that promises even exist, is to convince the other person of something. If you already believed me, I wouldn't need to make a promise. And if I promise you something out of the blue, something you never asked for and you don't even know why I would bring it up, that means I badly want you to believe it. This should always put you on guard. Why do I want you to believe it so much? And why do I think you wouldn't believe it if I just told you outright? If I say I've never been in a car accident, that's a reasonable statement. But if I feel the need to say, I promise you I've never been in a car accident, why did I feel the need to make a promise? It's almost certainly because I assumed you wouldn't believe me. And why am I so certain that you won't believe me? Because I don't believe me, because I know it's a lie. Sometimes a promise is even more of a blatant red flag. Sometimes a person will say a statement, pause briefly, and then promise. That means they heard what they said, decided it wasn't believable, and then tacked on the promise after the fact. For example, I know I was late to the last 5 meetings, but it'll never happen again. I promise. Of course the person is going to be late again. They know they're going to be late again. They don't believe for a second that they'll always be on time from now on, so they put on the words "I promise" in the hopes that it will convince you, because it definitely didn't convince them. If you want to learn more about these manipulative techniques, as well as how to deal with all kinds of shady characters, I recommend the book The Gift of Fear: Survival Signals That Protect Us from Violence by Gavin de Becker. It's a great book with a lot of very interesting stories and can be found in the Amazon link in the description below. What are your experiences? Have you had a time when someone used these techniques to manipulate you? Or perhaps you find yourself using these on others. Tell us about it in the comments below. In the next video, we'll talk about how to get rid of a stalker and how to keep the people you date from ever becoming stalkers to begin with. So stick around for that.